Thank you so much for joining the Brittany and Kendall show today and the myTalk Roundtable, Coping with Trauma, the Annunciation Church tragedy. On Wednesday, August 27th, the shooting occurred during a school mass at Annunciation School, resulting in the death of 2 children, along with 17 others injured. This happened right here in Minneapolis. myTalk felt a calling to take the next 2 hours to attempt a few things. First, we're going to talk to experts about how to talk to your children about this, even just how to talk to each other, and honestly, pretty much how to cope with this ourselves. Second, we are also raising money for resources for children in our community through Washburn's Children's Services. And thirdly, we wanted to create more community with dialogue. I'm Brittany Hagan. We've got Kendall Mark, and we are joined by 2 people from the Washburn's Children's Services. We have... just pulling it up right now. I want to make sure I get your titles right. We had a little bit of a delay. There we go. We have Jenny Britton, Clinical Director at Washburn's Children's Services, and Laura Gilbert, Associate Director for School-Based Services. Thank you guys so much for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, now, something really special about our community is we do have a lot of amazing nonprofits that are here to help out. Tell us what Washburn Children's Services does.
That's a great question. Washburn Center for Children, our mission is to nurture every child and family's well-being and full potential through transformative children's mental health care. What that means to us at Washburn is that we want to be where kids learn, laugh, love, and live, and help them navigate the chaos, turmoil, uncertainty of childhood, because we want them to have a happy, positive life ahead.
And you've been doing this for over 100 years, Jenny?
Yes.
When you explained a little bit about how Washburn started, it seemed like I can't believe that in the 1800s, someone had the wherewithal to go, these kids are going to need some help after a certain experience happened here in Minneapolis.
Yes. So back in 1880s, there was a really wonderful entrepreneurial man who came to Minnesota and said, I'm going to start some milling here. So the mills, the flour mills that are along the river. And if you've ever been to the Mill City Museum, you've seen where the mill explosion happened. That's actually the site of a flour mill that Cadwallader Washburn owned. And there was an explosion, and it left 19 children orphaned. And he said, we have to do something to help these kids. And so he created the Washburn Orphanage, a place for them to live, to grow up, to get support, and be surrounded by love. And since that time, that's where Washburn Center for Children started. And we've been working with kids and families and adapting our services based off of what the community needs since.
And Laura, I want to take the questions over to you. Since the tragedy at Annunciation, I know you all have been so busy, but you've been in schools helping kids deal with trauma for years now. Have you seen in recent years an uptick, or is it just more of a social acceptance and, hey, kids deal with things and we need professionals to be able to help them?
Sure. I think it's a combination of all of those things. We've certainly seen an uptick in the amount of referrals that we're getting at every school. We consistently hear from our teaching staff, our administrative staff, that they need more of us. So that tells us that what we're doing is not only needed, but more of us are needed. Certainly there aren't enough resources to go around to service all of the kids. And so part of what we're able to do with having staff directly in the school is help the teachers, help the administrative staff, help other people identify different things that we can all be doing to help these kids.
Yeah, because it takes a village.
Oh, and I just can't stress enough. I mean, I think everybody in the community benefits when we're taking care of, especially children. And I know as a myTalker myself, with all of this going on in the community, there is this feel of what can I do? And I can't say thank you enough for Washburn Center for Children. And if you're somebody who looks for kind of a call to action, we have been teaming up with you guys all this week. We are hoping to raise money for Washburn Children's Services to get more of you, Laura, in schools and, conversations about how kids are feeling in the trauma. And so if you are so inclined, we'd love you to go to mytalk1071.com. click, it's right on the landing page, but you can also keyword donate and help, because we want to team up. We get you guys into as many schools as we can.
Absolutely. Today, if you're just joining us, we will be talking about how do you talk to preschoolers and young kids, talking about how do you talk to teens. Shortly after that, really talking tools, how coping with fear and anxiety, strategies that help calm your body, your mind, how to build resilience and hope after something of this nature happens in life, and then answering questions that you might send in to us, that now that we have the professionals, you have access to that. If you do have questions, send them in to us, bkshow@mytalk1071.com. We'd love to hear from you. Jenny, the national attention has been on our state, has been on our kids, has been on our community. As someone who helps people process all the weight of that, plus dealing with the trauma that kids have experienced, what has that been like for you and your staff? How are you guys doing? I'm just curious,
It's a great question. What I would say is that, being a children's mental health worker takes a certain kind of person, right? And I don't know about you, Laura, but I find, people are coming to us and turning to us, and I will say this every single day for the rest of my career, is that when someone trusts you with their story, when they bravely walk into your office or you walk into their home or you're with them in school and they trust you with the pain and the nervousness and the anxiety and the fear, and they're looking for joy and they're looking for ways to understand, the privilege and honor of being with a child and a family as they work through that is one of the most fundamentally rewarding things I will ever do with my life.
That's amazing. And I know, Laura, this is something we're going to talk about, different age groups and how to talk to each kids. But it's one of those things. And if you're here in Minneapolis, it's, now it's been a little bit of time. Is there a world where they're not seeking this information, or they're getting it elsewhere where we don't need to engage with our kids about these conversations?
I think that is a valid question that we're hearing a lot. And I think the answer is yes, we do need to engage with our kids in the conversation. Of course, there are other outlets that kids are hearing things. We have news, we have radio, we have friends. Any child that you see that's over the age of 10 or 11 right now typically has a phone or some type of device. So a lot of the information is to them even before we as parents or caregivers are even there to talk to them about it. I think there's some fear, and rightfully so,
right?
That if we talk about it, we're going to scare our kids. And that's a valid fear.
It's scary.
It's scary, and it scares us as adults.
Yeah.
The hard part about that is that they are going to hear it. And if we're not talking about it, kids a lot of times make sense of what isn't said too, right? So we don't want them to formulate their own conclusion that isn't accurate either.
Yeah. Kind of fill in the gap. Sometimes
Absolutely.
The not being said is, we talk about this all the time in the celebrity world. When you don't know something, you fill it in with whatever you know. Right. And I think that this would be applied there, as that conversation they're having on the bus. And with, as I was a nanny and I had a lot of conversations with kiddos that I go, okay, I guess this is where I'm coming in. But you're so right. The unknowns and the not talking about it doesn't really solve much.
It doesn't. And then it opens the door for more misinformation.
Yeah.
Misinformation spreads so incredibly quickly, especially amongst our youth, that in itself can create more fear than really is necessary. So I think back to your question, do we as parents need to be talking to our kids about it? Yes, we do.
I was a lot of folks who are listening or listening to this later on YouTube or the podcast, I'd say, well, this wasn't in my community. I saw from the United States government, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, that over 2/3 of children report experiencing at least one traumatic event by age 16. That number blew me away, but you're both nodding. Jenny, you're nodding because you're like, yeah, that really checks out with what we see on a daily basis. So it might not be the extreme of violence in your school, a tragedy, but
right.
Trauma nonetheless affects so many children.
So many children. And, trauma is a journey. It's when we think about the shooting at Annunciation, we're in acute response mode, right? Where we're not doing deep trauma therapy because our bodies and our brains have a natural way of healing and moving through events. And we have to allow that to happen. And so when we think about trauma or mental health, right, it is a journey of a lifetime. But people need to nurture their mental health the same way they nurture their physical health. That's how we get to a healthy community. We were talking earlier, children are our most precious resource in the entire world.
Yeah.
They shape our community. They shape who we are. They are going to be the ones taking care of us, voting on our behalf, all of these things. And when they watch the grownups respond, Laura, you were talking about, right? Even if a parent is nervous or worried, one of the ways in which that parents and grownups can help is that even if they're scared, you have the conversation, because if you don't, somebody else will.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want them giving information or having a conversation where, you're not the person they want to come to talk, even if you say, I have absolutely no idea what to say to you right now.
And even Jenny, it's so interesting you say that, because even like I'm in that phase of modeling, right? I have a 3-year-old who models everything. When I'm sad, I verbalize it.
Those mirror neurons are real.
Right? I realize that when she mimics me on the phone, I go, how dare you? It's like everything's modeled. And I think there is something powerful about showing your kids how to have hard conversations just in general. Even if what they're taking away from is we're just going to have the conversation.
Yeah. And even if you say, I don't really know what to say right now, but I know that I want to be sitting with you and next to you as we talk about this together, as we think about this together.
Right. The idea of thank you for telling me.
Yes.
Love that. If you are listening right now, you're just joining us. This is Coping with Trauma, the Annunciation Church Tragedy, a myTalk Roundtable. We are currently taking donations to work with the Washburn Center for Children so they can expand their services to meet the demand that have come from the tragedy of the Annunciation Church. If you feel so inclined, every dollar helps. You can donate now through the myTalk website through Sunday at midnight. The keyword is donate. When we come back, we'll be talking about how do you talk to preschoolers and young kids specifically when it comes to coping with trauma.
Welcome back to the myTalk Roundtable, Coping with Trauma, the Annunciation Church Tragedy. On the Brittany and Kendall Show, we are joined by Jenny Britton, the Clinical Director of Washburn's Children's Services, and Laura Gilbert, an Associate Director of School-Based Services. Okay, guys, it's time to talk about talking to your preschoolers and young kids. And this is so interesting because I think sometimes as parents, the younger the kid is, we find ourselves going to a place of this doesn't affect them. I'm going to ask you, Laura, you're in a lot of schools and with a lot of ages. Is that hold true for younger kids?
I think kids of all ages, but specifically younger kids, look to their environment. They learn through observing. They learn through watching what their buddies are doing, what their teachers are doing, what their parents are doing. So the notion that they don't know what's happening around them could hold some truth, but more likely they know more than we think they do. So back to the point of talking to our kids about it, even if we've not said what's happening, they are sensing something. They know what the experience is like typically when their teacher is having their day-to-day experiences, what mom's like in the morning for breakfast. They pick up when those things are different. So they know more than we think they do.
And that's, so daunting as when I have a 3-year-old who is, we spend all the time together. She notices when I put my hair up in a weird way.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's, of course, they're noticing those little differences. So when they notice those little differences, like what is happening in their head?
I think they're trying to put the story together. And that's a really good space to start with small children, is to really engage and ask what they know, right? Like, we don't want to start by giving all of the details. And for young children, all of the details are not appropriate to be giving in the first place.
Yeah.
But we want to gauge how much we want to get into that conversation based on what they already know. So a good starting point is just to inquire about it or ask about it.
Can you give I'm thinking like a semi-specific example. So for example, if the Annunciation Tragedy, a kiddo that's 3, what might it look like to say directly, like,
Sure.
Hey, I'll use Brittany's daughter as an example. Hey, go, like, do you understand what's going on? Can you give me an example of what that might look like?
Yes. And I think that terminology and talking to your kids like you typically would is really important. So each subset of parents, families use language a little bit differently. So I would say stay true to how you typically speak to your child. Don't try to talk above or below them. Stay with what would be kind of typical for your family. So to your example, I might say something like, something really big and scary happened today. Can you tell me about it? Do you, what do you think happened today? Like, so just not even understand, using the term of understand at 3, that's really tricky to even maybe comprehend what that terminology is.
Yeah.
But you just labeling that something scary happened today, and opening up the dialogue to understand a little bit about their knowledge base of what happened.
And, we were talking a little bit about this before we came on, but Jenny, you brought up young kids still know. We might think they don't, but to what Laura was just saying, they are going to pick up on those social cues.
Absolutely. Kids are hardwired to notice the nuances around them. They're trying to figure out where they fit in the world, who's safe, who's not safe, what's comfortable, what's not comfortable, what do I like, what do I not like. That the whole point of development in childhood is understanding that part of self. So they know. So even if you say something like, you know what, my heart hurts today, I'm sad today because I heard something that makes me sad. Even if you're not sharing the details, it's like, I heard something that made me feel sad. You know what? Sometimes when I get sad, I cry. Sometimes when I get sad, I get mad. Sometimes I just need to go for a walk and move my body. Do you want to go for a walk with me? Right? It's still saying like something happened. Here are some choices that are okay coping.
Yeah.
And do you want to join me?
Because isn't that so powerful? I mean, there's that modeling piece put in there again. I find that to be, right, as a parent, if you can at all show a kiddo how to healthily move through things like this, and if it's just as simple of, I'm doing it in front of you, how powerful is that?
It's so powerful. I think there's 3 rules to be the very best parent you can possibly be. No one ever is going to be a perfect parent, right? So what you're hoping for is to be a good enough parent. And one of them is to repair when there's a rupture, because there's always going to be a rupture.
Yeah.
You're going to say something that hurts your child's feelings. You're going to be mad about something that happened at work, or someone cut you off on the way home.
Yeah.
And you're going to treat someone different, right?
Right.
So there's always teach how to repair when there's a rupture. So that means you have to do it. The second thing is let them know that it's okay to ask for help. The only way to do that is for kids to see their parents seeking help when they need it too. And the third thing is to laugh and play with our kids. Grown-ups, for me too, the world gets harder and harder as you get older and you forget to play as much. But our kids learn through play and activities and laughter. And laughter helps you so much recover and find joy, which builds resilience and builds hope, which is what we all need.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I just want you to repeat those 3 things one more time, because if somebody maybe just missed the end of that, they were so important and profound when you're talking to your kids and you don't know what to do to help them.
Yep,
what were those 3 tools?
Thank you. I would say focus on when there's a rupture, make sure you repair. You want to laugh and play with your children, and you want to show them what it means and looks like to ask for help when they need it.
It's so powerful because, I know I feel this way. It's me and Gogo, when she's not with her dad. And I always feel like I have to take everything on and show her how strong I can be. But that asking for help piece is important because I would want her to ask for help.
That's right.
That modeling piece is just amazing. We were talking about too, Jenny, is how kids perceive that kind of dysregulation. So something in the house is different. How are they perceiving that? Like, how are they taking that in?
So children usually almost automatically believe it's something about themselves.
Interesting.
Because they don't have, brains develop until you're 25, right? And so they don't have a fully developed brain. They don't have a sense of all the things around them. And so they make it about themselves. If you think about back to either one of your childhoods, I don't need to be your therapist, but I'm sure you can go there with me real quick. But I can think back to the things that I believe about myself as an adult were something I interpreted as a child.
Yeah.
Like I got reinforced for being a good helper, and I'm a therapist.
Right.
So even if you take something that's simple, but that's how kids learn who they are, right? And so we want to help them make meaning of some of those things. Otherwise, they're going to just think it's about them.
And that's horrible.
Yeah, that's like such a, the stereotypical thing that happens. And again, like, because I went through a divorce recently, is that conversation of every kid goes to a place, is it me, if nobody talks to them about it? Mm-hmm. And I mean, this is a much bigger conversation we're having with our whole community at an epic loss, and things have shifted. Things have shifted in your household. Things have shifted in your community. So you would imagine most kids would go to a place of, what did I do? What is it about me? And like you said, that's like a survival mechanism. So how important it is to address that. So Laura, I'm sure you have a lot of conversations with kids. And can you give us like a little bit of tips around kind of setting the stage for looking for a place or when to kind of jump in and have conversations with our kids?
Yeah, which is important to understand when is the best time, what's going on around you. I think home is people's safe space.
Right, yeah.
Parents are kids' safe space. So if you have the opportunity to be in a space that is part of their routine, that's always going to kind of set the stage for, it's safe, I'm with my safe person, I'm in maybe a more calm space to have some dialogue. The other thing I would say is think about timing, right? We probably don't want to have these conversations after we've just walked in the door, super long day, we're trying to get dinner on the table, whatever it may be. The perfect opportunity is not going to be there, but I think we need to be intentional about when we're having these conversations. I would also say that we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to be able to set the stage, and more of these conversations happen naturally or at the most random times, and we might not be prepared for them. And so just being okay with that. We need to be flexible, just like we're trying to teach our kids to be flexible. So taking the opportunity of, if after dinner time you typically play with your kids on the floor, or you're doing Play-Doh at the table, or whatever it may be, it can be a built-in conversation while you're doing something enjoyable, and it should. Mm-hmm. They should be able to have some activity that is also a little bit distracting, a little bit calming, a little bit like their norm, because these are hard things to talk about.
Yeah, that's so interesting. The know your kid thing, I read somewhere around, and I know we're going to talk about teenagers next, but just popped in my head around sometimes there are kids who don't want that intimacy, holding hands and things like that. So having a conversation in the car with them where you're both looking forward, where you can accomplish a lot. And I was like, it blew my mind. I was like, oh, because you got to know your kid.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there's a world where driving a carpool, you when you have one-on-one time, that's the time you get with your kids. I'm sure a lot of things you hear all the time that parents go, that's where this conversation started.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that this will lead into teens and older kids, but I have a 13-year-old. I've said and shared at different times we've talked about, that is the time where he and I often have a lot of our conversations. It's not looking face to face. It's less intimidating. It's less distracting. You're in a car.
Yeah.
And I think it's about making the comfort level be what it needs to be at the time. Mm-hmm. If we force these conversations, if we have this notion of that it needs to be in this certain place, we all need to be together and have these structured questions, we're just not going to get the results that we're looking for. Mm-hmm. And knowing that the conversation is just the start of it, you might get, a child that's just not ready to talk about it. And then that's our cue too, to back off and to play and to do other things and to be a safe place so that when they are ready, they're coming back to it.
I want to ask one final question about preschoolers and young kids before we take a break. And then again, we'll be talking about how you talk that same conversation with teens, preteens, and what that dialogue looks like. We talked about the ways to talk to your child, how that works. How often should you be checking in on someone of that age that is possibly still processing trauma?
I think it really depends, and you know your child best. Caregivers are the experts on their kids. You see them more than anybody else does, right? And I would say sometimes with kids, it's important just to say something like, is it okay if we check in again? Mm-hmm. And if I don't ask you soon enough and you want to check in with me, that's okay too.
put it out there for them.
It's just out there, right? Because you never know the moment.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many parents have said we were just like playing in the sandbox or on the playground, and all of a sudden, they're talking about something that happened at school or something that happened within their family, but then they just kept playing. As Laura was saying, like, that's great.
Yeah.
They're exploring, they're chewing it up while they're exploring, and they're doing the things they're naturally supposed to be doing, which is moving their body and learning how to slide and, for those gross motor skills. It's really important that kids can have the conversations. We don't have to sit down and look at them and have it be serious for them to understand.
And how powerful to just be that person for them who is there for them when they're ready.
Absolutely.
There's no bigger privilege.
Right?
When we come back, we will be talking about how to talk to the kids in that age gap, really between they're old enough to understand, those late elementary schoolers, early middle schoolers. How do you talk to them when they are coping with trauma? We
are so lucky to have Jenny Britton, the clinical director at Washburn's Children's Services, and Laura Gilbert, the associate director for school-based services. We're going to talk about teens now. I've been told they are the scariest group of humans. They're my favorite. As a nanny of teens, I love hanging with the good teens. Right? They're so magical. The way their brains put things together. It just feels like a 3-year-old and teen have more in common than I think anybody can ever talk about. But talking to teens in this situation can be a lot. And I want to know what you think, Laura, about starting out the conversation with a teen in your life.
I think similar to starting out the conversation with a preschooler, you want to know what they know.
Yeah, right.
And for a lot of our teens, they found out the information before adults were able to get to them. So, for example, my 13-year-old was with friends during the time. By the time I got home from work, I said, "Did you hear what happened today?" And he knew. And so then that can also lead into the conversation of, tell me what you know.
Yeah.
Tell me what you heard.
Mm-hmm. And we talk about this too, that misinformation piece. Would that be the important time to kind of ask what you know and be able to follow that up?
Yes. And be able to really clarify that misinformation. So also don't shy away from correcting, not in a way of they did anything wrong. We're not jumping on them for having the misinformation, but really helping them understand actually that isn't what happened and really being factual about what did happen.
I had an opposite experience of Laura. I got home from work and our 12-year-old hadn't heard anything, but I had to ask, have you heard anything about what happened today? And she said no. And I said, well, some kids got hurt today and I'm sad. And she paused for a second and she said, am I safe here? And I said, of course you're safe here. And then she paused and she said, so you were out helping, doing your helper job? And I said, yes. And I said, if you have questions, you can come and talk to me anytime you want. And she paused. She thought about it for a long time. She didn't want any more information in that moment. I could tell. Right. And I said, my heart is heavy. And she said, well, let's go make some tea and watch some Gilmore Girls. That always makes us feel better. Yeah. And I said, you're right, it does. Right. And it was because she didn't know and she didn't need all the details in that moment. Right. Which is different than your son who's saying, I heard some of these things. And it was a really important conversation. I said, we'll just come back to it. If you ever have questions, you're welcome to come and talk to me about it. And she said, okay, I'm going to go start the hot water. Oh, also, would you like popcorn? She's very sweet.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm good.
And Jen, that's all modeling. I mean, it's so amazing because you've showed a world where, okay, right now as a person, I'm not ready to take that all in. As a teen, you're saying I'm not ready for more information, but I do know here are some great healthy coping mechanisms.
And it sounds like a good way to start, if you want to start it, if your child doesn't bring it to you, is addressing how you feel immediately,
right?
Correct?
Yes, absolutely. Because it's good for kids to know that their parents have feelings that are not about them being mad because they're late because they were trying to get to the bus or some of those other things, right? Parents need to be humans. In fact, it's one of the best things you can do for your children is to just be a human. You get to have bad moments. You get to have bad dates. You get to be sad. They get to see you cry and it be okay.
Yeah.
You just have to name, I'm sad today, right? Or like, I don't even know what these tears are about. I think I'm tired. Does that ever happen to you?
And
it happens to them.
I think it feels overwhelming, the verbiage. Can you give us an exact verbiage around, Laura, around talking to a teen when you don't know what to say?
Pretty much that. Which is not helpful, but I'll give you a better example.
Yeah.
I think it's very important to be able to just say, I don't have the answer. So we want to know why. We want to know why bad things happen. We want to know why something as tragic as this happened. Mm-hmm. There isn't an explanation or an answer that we can provide. Mm. And we want it and we seek it. And sometimes that's where that misinformation can come from too. But I think it's important to model for our kids that we don't always have the answers. Mm. And that in itself can feel scary, and we can still talk about it, and we can still talk about how we feel about that. But I think people shy away from maybe having the conversation because they say, I don't know what to tell my kids.
Yeah.
And that's what you tell your kids.
Yeah, there's a vulnerability to that.
Absolutely.
That I think a lot of adults really struggle with.
Yeah.
But to be able to show that to someone who trusts you and then can showcase their vulnerability, I understand how that would really open up a conversation eventually. If someone's listening and going, yeah, I got a kiddo, they are not going to talk to me about this, but maybe I need them to. How do you go about that? I know you guys, you've worked with people like this. Like Jenny, how do you go about talking to that 17-year-old boy who's like, I don't want to talk about it, and slams the door shut? What do you do as the parent?
So if that was me, or if I was talking with the parent, I would go sit outside the door. They can slam the door. They get to be mad. And I might say, I know you don't want to. And these are really critical conversations for us to have. So I'm going to sit here for a minute. I'm going to be quiet. If you change your mind and you want to connect with me, that's great. And if you don't, I'm just going to sit here. And I'm going to check in with you again, because it's really important for us to have this conversation. And you know your kids, so you'll know if you need to or not.
Yeah.
And if you're worried, you have to ask, right? If you're worried about how they're doing, if something has really changed for them post this shooting or another traumatic event or a tragedy or a loss of some kind. Mm-hmm. I mean, our community is not only, this is also a crisis, this is a trauma, but there's also immense grief, right? So we're navigating all three of those at one time. Mm. It can be very confusing and very complex for adults and for kids.
Well, right. And to your point, maybe it's something more like, my best friend just moved, my grandpa died. It doesn't have to be something of the caliber that we're discussing today. Right. It can be anything. It's still trauma.
Absolutely.
Trauma is trauma.
And can I say one thing?
Please,
quick?
Please.
It was, when things like this happen at Annunciation, it is normal for people, adults and kids alike, to think about the other pain and hurt they have in their own life. Mm. And so it's important to also understand that sometimes our reactions are about this event, but it's also about other times that aren't processed for us, or that we're still worried about, or we still wonder about. And we're grieving, as well as, looking at seeing this tragedy unfold in our community. And so our own grief is going to get pulled into it. Our own trauma history is going to get pulled into it. And that's the uptake and calls to us at Washburn, and to what we're seeing is like, I'm having a much harder time in these last 2 weeks, because it's not only did it happen local, it's bringing up all of this other stuff for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that security piece that comes in so many different ways. I wanted to ask you, Laura, about a non-reaction and where we fall with that, because sometimes when you tell a teenager or something, you think you're going to get one thing and you get another. Is that something we should be concerned about when there really isn't too much of a reaction?
I think we need to be really intentional about not expecting a certain reaction. Mm. So just as we all respond differently as adults to things, kids and teens react differently as well. We've got the kids that are I'll use my two kids as examples. My younger one will ask 1,000 questions, needs to know everything, wears his heart on his sleeve. The other one's a little bit more intentional about how much emotion he puts out there. I know that about them. So their reactions are going to be different. So when we expect somebody has experienced a trauma, a situation that they should be reacting a certain way, there isn't a certain way that somebody should be responding to it. So non-reaction can be something to be keeping an eye out for, but just like any other child or teen, we need to be looking for bigger signs that there's a concern there. So just because they're not reacting, so if a parent is saying like, I'm concerned because they're not crying or they're not asking questions about it, that in itself doesn't necessarily mean that there's anything wrong. And it also doesn't mean that they're not thinking about it, processing, trying to make sense of it. But if that is their personality and how they process emotion and situations, that's okay.
What are some of the signs that someone who's a caregiver, a parent of a teen, what are some signs that you look at even 2 months down the line that you go, this is different? Maybe they're dealing with trauma of some level.
I think, it depends on the child, of course, right? When something acute like this happens in our community, and that's like a clinical term, right? The students and staff at Annunciation for 30 days post-traumatic event can't be diagnosed with a trauma disorder. We're having an acute response to a tragedy, right? We're thinking about how we're doing. We're chewing up some of these things. And that's true for everyone else also. And we know that if symptoms last longer than 30 days, longer than 6 weeks, longer than 8 weeks, that's when we start to get a little bit more worried. We're wondering about, do you need more help and some support? Having an immediate reaction, bringing up symptoms or concerns or feeling shut down or feeling open to talk is pretty typical. It's the longevity. How far past is it? Has their behavior changed? Have they stopped eating? Are they eating more? Have they changed their friend groups? Are they, isolating themselves? Did they change everything about how they look, which teenagers do sometimes, but usually not like overnight.
Yeah.
Right? If you start to pick up on where fundamental changes are happening and they're staying, that's when you want to be not concerned, but you want to pay attention to, maybe this is a time to bring in a therapist or to make sure you have people that can connect with you and talk with you.
I think that's so powerful to think about the idea of a typical reaction is not typical in an atypical situation.
Right.
And so when you talk about the longevity of it and leaving room to have any sort of reaction for a little bit, I mean, I think that, I don't want to use the word normal, but it would be something that you would have.
It's typical and it's actually healing.
Yeah, right?
Right? Just to say, like, this happened, now you're traumatized, your life has changed forever, you'll never be able to do these things. That is not true.
Yeah.
Trauma occurred. Yeah. We are grieving, we have to, and we get to have a reaction.
Yeah.
It's what we do with it after, right? That's the most important thing for parents, for all of us, grown-ups, preschool, teenagers, doesn't matter.
When is the point with a child or teenager where as a parent, I think I know the answer, but I want to hear it verbalized, maybe from you, Laura. When is the point where you go, I can't handle this on my own, and they look at a nonprofit like you all and say, I need professional help? Is there a word for that? Is there a feeling that you hear over and over that maybe someone listening is going, oh, that's clocking?
Sure. Well, first, I would just say that, like, to Jenny's point, you as parents know your kids the best. So if you have a gut feeling about something, follow your gut. Timetables are different for everybody. Grief looks different for everybody. So if it is, hey, it's been 3 months since X, Y, or Z happened, I feel like they should be in a different place. That doesn't necessarily mean that the child is in need of additional help. They just might still be experiencing some grief. Where I would say that it is more of an area where you're like, I'm out of my league here. I need a little bit more assistance if it is impacting parts of your child's life in a non-positive way. So if it's impacting their ability to go to school, to hang out with friends, to have sleep that is uninterrupted and not waking up with nightmares, or things that seem atypical for your child to a degree that's impacting their day-to-day life.
Thank you. since we're talking about coping and things that you can do for yourself or for your family members, that's really the next topic that we want to focus on while we have Washburn Children's Jenny Britton and Laura Gilbert here with us. They're the professionals. We're so grateful that you're here to talk to us about these things and talk to our listeners about this. If you are interested, right now, myTalk is also working with Washburn Center for Children. We're doing donations for them now through Sunday so they can help families, specifically after the tragedy at Annunciation Church. All you have to do is head to mytalk1071.com, use the keyword donate. It's right there on our homepage, and you can be a part of the financial burden and help in the situation in that way. When we come back, like we said, we'll be talking about tools for coping with fear and anxiety when it comes to dealing with trauma for yourself or for your children.
To the myTalk Roundtable, Coping with Trauma, the Annunciation Church tragedy. We are so blessed. We are here with Jenny Britton and Laura Gilbert. We wanted to talk about tools for coping with fear and anxiety. Now, this can be applied to your loved ones. This can be applied to yourself. Let's talk about kind of where these fears are coming from, because I think one of the big questions we're having trouble answering is when our kids talk about, are they safe? Mm-hmm. Jenny, how do we answer that? And I mean, how do we kind of fathom that in our brains?
It's a good question, and it's a complicated question,
right?
Right, because we should be able to live in a world where we can say to our kids, "You're safe at school." Right? We should. I mean, that feels like a right and a privilege our kids should have in this country and in any country that they live in. I think navigating this can be tricky, but what's important to focus on is psychological safety. So when you're with me, you're safe with me. Right? Because kids learn from, it's part of the attachment cycle. They learn from you younger that I'm safe with you. I have to go out and meet other people, and then I have to come back. And I'm going to go out and I'm going to come back. Right? And you're creating psychological safety. And so that's the most important thing for us to focus on, is reestablishing that psychological safety within our relationships. That's how kids learn. That's how they grow. That's how they receive comfort, is within the context of relationships. So focusing on that is the best thing you can do. You can say things like, I've also reviewed the protocol for your school. Like, I've reached out to your school leaders, right? I feel confident in this, right? Your school has this protocol. Mm-hmm. And we can think about ways to connect with our kids during the school day, right? I put a lunch in their lunch box, or I'll make sure I call you when you get off the bus, or I'll meet you when you get off the bus. And there's ways to connect with kids to make sure that they know someone will be there whenever possible. And that is really important for reestablishing that sense of safety within them.
Mm-hmm. We were talking about how a lot of responses are held in the body too. We sort of touched on that with teens and how they might be reacting in a way that we think isn't how they should be reacting, but it is very quote unquote normal. Laura, can you talk about the triggers and the responses that can be held within you?
Yeah. So I think that when we as adults experience a situation, you can remember that, like, I felt this giant pit in my stomach, whatever that reaction was, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. You know, when you experience something that is traumatic, it gets stored in a way that we don't always recognize. And that is not just in our emotional reactions, but it can be in our physical reactions as well. So like in a school-based setting, a lot of times we might see that a kid is visiting the nurse's office very regularly with stomach aches, or a headache, or something that is recurring that we've not yet been able to find a medical reason for. That in itself is a really good cue to say, maybe there is something else that is actually, and it's really important to note that it's not that those physical symptoms aren't real. So that's the other thing we want to reinforce. Mm-hmm. It is not saying you're not having a stomach ache right now. I think you're worried about something. No, they really are having a stomach ache right now, but that is their body's way of really kind of working through whatever it is that then we're able to kind of get more under the surface of what is causing this.
Well, I feel like sometimes, correct me if I'm wrong, it could be something that's even more severe with some people, like crippling headaches,
Yes.
the different parts of your body that might ache that never have before.
Yeah, and how the body is designed is that the most nerve endings live in our brain, but the second most nerve endings in our body live in our stomach. And so there's a lot of like stomach aches, diarrhea, stomach cramping, food related things.
Because it's a fight or flight concept,
Because it's a
right?
fight or flight concept. Yeah. And so those different parts of your body get activated in those spaces. And sometimes they can be debilitating and severe, and we should take them seriously. What I would say is that if we know a child has experienced community violence, grief, loss, a trauma, you named at the beginning, right? That 2/3 of kids before the age of 16 have experienced at least one trauma in their life. Mm-hmm. We have to pay attention to the physical symptoms, and are they connected to something emotional and traumatic or full of grief or uncertainty or worry? Because sometimes the treatment can't just be straight medical.
Right.
Because we're never going to get to the bottom of what that is. If it's really about, like, I miss my grandpa. He was the most important person in my life. He suddenly passed away. I can't call him when I'm worried. Mm-hmm. Right. And I have a chronic headache now.
Right. Yeah. You all of a sudden, even those little things, you're like, I've been clenching my jaw for this long. Like all those things, a big piece, at least I've seen in the veteran community around trauma, is sleep.
Yes.
And how connected. Tell me how big of a part sleep plays in your body and trauma.
Sleep is the number one thing you can do physically to heal and recover from trauma, anxiety, grief, anything.
The number one thing
number
is
one
sleep.
thing is sleep. Number one. Above almost anything else that you could possibly do. Of course, you want water and you want food and some of those pieces, but sleep offers the brain and the body an opportunity to restore itself. And without that restoration, it's almost impossible to keep metabolizing or chewing up what's happening, because you're stuck in this space where your body doesn't have the opportunity to restore itself every night, which is what sleep does. REM cycle, right? It helps us chew up the events of the day. That's where dreams come from. Where you're like, I don't really understand why I was running naked in the hallway at my school, but I must be worried about something, right? But your brains they're pretty magical, actually. And they have a lot of capacity to heal, but they only can get that support by good sleep.
And it's so counterintuitive, Jenny, as a lot of communities, including a lot of people in Minnesota and veterans, kind of associate sleep with a laziness, which is kind of, crazy, that thought of you're actually healing your body.
You're actually healing your body. I would say, sleep, most people say about 8 hours, but some people need 10, some people need 6. But people need regular sleep. And actually, sleep hygiene is one of the best things you can do too. What's your sleep routine? How do you get into it? So that you can actually rest and recover for the next day.
We have so many different things that we're touching on and that we're hitting on that we want to keep circling back to. When we come back, we're going to keep talking about this idea of ways that your body physically holds on to trauma and grief, and how you can work to cope with that fear and anxiety, both with your loved ones and with ourselves too, because if we're not okay, how can we help someone else? All of that information, of course, will be back in just a couple of minutes. This is Coping with Trauma, the Annunciation Church tragedy, speaking with Clinical Director of Washburn Children's Services, Jenny Britton, and Laura Gilbert, the Associate Director for School-Based Services.
Again, this happened right here in Minneapolis. So as myTalk does, we felt very inclined and blessed to be able to attempt a few things today. First, we're talking to experts on how to talk to our children, how to address this with each other, and how to address it within ourselves. Second, we are raising money for resources for children in our community through Washburn's Children's Services. You can hit up mytalk1071.com. It'll be right there on the landing page. But the keyword is donate. And thirdly, create more community with dialogue. Thank you so much for being here today. We have Laura Gilbert and Jenny Britton from the Washburn Children's Services. We're talking about fear and anxiety, and on a level that we're finding ourselves noticing it in our bodies. We were talking about the puzzle piece analogy. Can you tell us what that is? What is the puzzle analogy?
So when we experience a distressing moment, right? Not everything is a trauma or is a tragedy, right? I mean, the Annunciation shooting absolutely is. But when we experience something that's distressing, we are hardwired for survival. So our brain and our body naturally breaks up the images, what's happening, into different puzzle pieces and stores it in different places in our body and in our brain, because we literally can't absorb all of it at once. It's the way we've survived from many, many years, right, to be the beings that we are now, is that we are still innately hardwired for survival. So it gets broken up into pieces. And so we've been talking a little bit about why it's important to do some meaning making for our kids and for ourselves. Meaning making helps us put those pieces back together in an integrated photo, right? So that kids aren't left with, well, I don't know, maybe I'm the reason my parents got divorced because it changed my life and that feels hard. And, I'm holding on to that piece. But if we can give, kids a narrative of like, mom and, your parents getting a divorce didn't actually have anything to do with you. We love you. We know this is hard. That piece kind of pops back into the picture. And so it's important that's why meaning making is important. And that's also why trauma lives in our body and experiences live in our body, and not just even the physical pieces. Can I be a nerd for a minute?
Of course. Okay. I love it.
There is something called bilateral stimulation, which is when you stimulate both the left and right hemisphere of your brain, right? It's why I don't understand this, because I'm not a runner. But because I think running is for emergencies only. But people who do run get like a runner's high, right? If you've taken a really long walk with friends and you're talking about something and you're walking, you're stimulating both the left and right hemisphere of your brain, because you're moving the left side and the right side and the left side and the right side. If you've ever been a part of drumming circles, anything that stimulates both sides of your body and your brain helps you chew up what's happening. So Laura was talking about, playing with kids and having conversations. They're doing something physical while being able to talk about it is really an integrative experience, right? So we shouldn't be afraid to be doing things. In fact, we actually have to move our body in whatever ways feel comfortable and safe to move your body in order to chew up what's happened and put that whole picture back together, so that we don't leave with something being stuck, wondering, is that about me? Could I have done something? Right? Do I feel guilty? Do I feel sad? Why do I feel sad, but my brother doesn't feel sad? Right? But if we can do that work, then we're just healthier beings.
We've been talking so much about, and I'm glad you brought up just grief and trauma in a different way. Like you brought up the idea of a divorce. Earlier we said someone whose grandfather passes away, that meant a lot to them. When you're dealing with grief, is it the same feelings as what we're dealing with trauma, or do they manifest differently?
That's a great question.
Yeah, grief is something that's very typical and normative and healthy. Grief is something that we all experience based on if we've lost someone or something really important to us. So I think the notion of grief is hard to talk about because it's hard. We're experiencing something that we don't want to.
Uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable. It is sad and looks different for everybody as far as how they grieve. But grieving is important. Grieving is healthy. Grieving helps us remember things in a positive way too. So grief doesn't have to be something that we view as negative. Grief can be something that is so beautiful and joyful. Maybe not right away, but can turn into that. And so I think we shy away from grief when a lot of times we really should be leaning more into it.
And I think people think, and assume, well, I haven't had this huge, it doesn't feel like a huge loss, or something where someone would say to you, oh, your partner passed away, or there was an accident or something like that, right? Where you're like, you must be grieving something. Grief can be the loss of the life you thought you were going to have.
Yeah.
Grief can be the loss of like a friendship changing that you thought was going to be your friend forever. Like grief can come in so many different forms. I would say, and I haven't done the research, maybe someone else will. Most people in this world are grieving something at some point, almost all the time, right? It's a normal part of our existence. Right? Grieving, the death of children in a mass shooting is far more complicated, of course. But it is a natural biological process that we have to allow people to do.
the analogy that keeps coming to my head, just as like somebody who's a little bit more, have to simplify things, is how angry we get at mucus and when we get a cold and all that snot that comes out. And the reality is it's our body saving us from things getting worse. But we find ourselves being mad at it. But it's this way. And now the way you guys are speaking about grief is that same thought I have, is that it's your body literally saving you and processing. And I find that to be so interesting. The way you're putting it is that grief isn't bad. It's a process we need.
I sat down with a client many years ago that completely changed how I thought about crying in tears. This woman had been through like unspeakable things. And I had asked, so this was at Washburn. It was a parent of someone we were working with. And I said, well, what brought you to my office today? Like, what would you want to talk about? And she was really nervous. And she said, I'm not sure I want to talk about it. Like, I'm not sure this is good. But over time, as she started talking, she said, I don't cry because crying makes me feel weak. And I said, you know what's interesting? You are the absolute strongest, most resilient person I've ever met in my life. I do not believe that crying is a sign of weakness. Crying is a sign of strength. You're releasing, you're honoring your own experience. And she wept. And she said, I haven't cried like this in 10 years. Since this trauma happened. And I was like, it is protective sometimes to feel like to not cry. I have to have my armor up, right? I don't want to be seen as the tearful one. But crying is a natural biological release of emotion in your body that you actually need. And so there's bravery behind allowing yourself to heal that way.
I keep thinking too about when you're going through this process, not just helping your child, but with your child. I want to make sure that if someone's just joining us, they hear the part that you both spoke to, which was if you're crying, and no matter the child's age, they see you addressing it straight on. Right,
Absolutely.
Jenny?
Yep, absolutely. I think you can say, and the crying can come from a lot of reasons. I'm sad. I had a hard day at school. The other day I came home and my partner walked in the room and I was tearful and he said, "Are you doing okay?" And I was like, "They're just here."
Yeah.
I don't actually have words for them. It just happened. I've had a day, but I walked in the house and I finally felt like I shouldn't say finally,
safe.
but I felt safe here. And so then apparently my feelings came out of my eyeballs. That's what's happening right now. And I don't have words for it. And it's not even tangible, but it's just what happened.
I think that as someone who does struggle with letting their emotions out, I know a lot of people are, especially in our culture here in Minnesota, we're stiff upper lip people, that it's hard to hear that, but the permission that you give us by saying, hey, this is a totally normal reaction. In fact, to Brittany's analogy, it's your body saving yourself. I mean, that sentence, that idea alone is extremely powerful.
Well, and that you move on too, right? Like that the tears don't stop you from continuing on with your night or talking to your partner or being with your child. So you can do both things, and that crying or having that emotional response is not going to define then what happens the next few hours.
No, for sure.
And it's funny you even say that, because I cry. I'm a crier. I cry all the time. Kendall's seen me cry many times. Even on my deployment, I cried. I feel like it was just, you can multitask while crying.
You can.
I have ran and cried. I have cleaned and cried. And I love the notion. I talk with veterans a lot, and giving that permission to somebody you love, that who defines that stoicness is strength, and you go, you can still have that. You can still be that person. Yes. Just I don't take a little break and go cry somewhere. It just feels so good.
It's interesting when we talk about Minnesota and sort of the stoicness or the passive aggressive, but I would say more passive most of the time.
Yeah.
Way that Minnesotans sort of engage. If we don't talk about it, the risk that happens is that we pass it down to other generations and other people because it's not metabolized within us. So then if we're shoving it down and we're not talking about it, it's going to come out sideways. It's going to come out in our decision making. It's going to come out in our relationships. It doesn't mean everything's necessarily doomed, right? But all of us are the product of some likely unprocessed generational trauma, some grief, some family history. And when you live in this beautiful state of Minnesota where people aren't as direct and they are a little bit more passive and sometimes a little bit more quiet, we can keep that stuff to ourselves, air quotes. But by keeping it to ourselves, we're keeping it stuck. It stays. It doesn't move, right? And sometimes the impact of that means that some piece of it continues with other people around us in our life. So it's more than permission. It's like we all kind of have to.
Yeah.
Even if it feels weird and super uncomfortable.
And
we all
when
have
you're
to.
not fine, being able to say you're not fine.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's always the response. How are you? I'm fine.
And even you saying that.
We do it. I do it all the time.
Yeah. Weeping and go, I'm fine.
Fine.
Yes.
Fine.
But
I like-
also, it's okay to not be fine. And it's okay to model for kids and other adults that we don't have to always just say we're okay. And it also doesn't mean that you're looking for somebody to save you from it or go in depth in a conversation. But like, it is a very scary thing to open up and say, you're good and I'm not. Like, I don't know that I want to say that to you. And sometimes you really need to.
This has been such a powerful conversation. It is far from over. If you're just joining us right now, this is the myTalk Roundtable, Coping with Trauma, the Annunciation Church Tragedy. We're joined by Washburn Children's Services, Jenny Britton and Laura Gilbert. They've been talking to us on a professional level about how we can communicate, how we can process, how we can grieve, not only just ourselves, but of course with our children, our teenagers, friends, family.
Let's just touch quickly, too, again, on what Washburn Children's Services does.
Yeah, we provide community-based mental health to the kids and families within an 11-county metro area, right? And so we want to be where kids learn, laugh, love, and live. So we are in 65 schools.
Wow.
We are in homes all over those 11 counties. We provide outpatient testing, day treatment, early childhood interventions, DBT groups, crisis stabilization, intensive in-home. I mean, we have a whole spectrum of services because kids need different things at different times. And we want to be able to coordinate what that care looks like for our community.
And when we're talking about specifically what's happened in our community here, we think about changing things up. We think about like, what can we do to make things better immediately for ourselves or for our kid? We're very reactionary people, right? Especially when it comes to our own children. Like, I want to fix it immediately. But you were just saying, Jenny, that structure and routine is so helpful for families when it comes to navigating, coping with trauma or grief of any kind.
Absolutely. You know, and people can be hesitant to go back. Like, do schools go back exactly the same way? Does Annunciation go back exactly the same way, right? And it's not that you do everything that you would always do, but structure and routine is neurobiologically settling for adults and for kids. And so even if it's, we had this conversation, I have soccer practice, so you want to go to soccer practice tonight, right? It doesn't mean that you aren't caring, that you're not, working on what's happening, that you're not feeling what's happening. It just means that that's something you're going to do for yourself, that you need to do for your own nervous system to settle yourself. So I would think about bedtime routines or morning routines or ways to connect. But structure and routine is really fundamental to particularly how kids, as they're developing, can kind of internally structure themselves within a day. Otherwise, you've seen toddlers. You have a toddler.
Yes.
They're complete chaos.
Oh, yeah.
Teenagers, complete chaos. Like, they need some routine and structure to be able to actually process what's happening, because if they don't have it, they're kind of on their own, off on their own.
And you guys touched also on that psychological safety. Does it fall into that as well?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we're creatures of habit. And so we know what we're used to. And kids and adults really thrive on knowing what's coming next. And when we don't know what's coming next, we sometimes get anxious about it or get nervous. And so especially after something really big has happened, having some semblance of a routine is settling. It's not your entire routine, but it might be one or two things.
Yeah.
And that in itself feels more normative for all of us. And so it could be as simple as you need it to be, but finding one or two things that are a typical thing that you do every day, your body also resonates with what your body typically feels like during that routine. So if it is reading a book before bed, that is a calming experience. Your body is going to experience that, whether or not you're intentionally thinking that that's the point of this or not.
Laura, as someone who goes into these schools, since you are the Associate Director of School-Based Services with Washburn, do you hear from kids in other situations ever in your profession that I guess you could call it survivor's guilt, that they think that maybe they should have done more, or that, well, why did something happen to so-and-so and not happen to me?
Yeah, I think kids look for answers and look for reasons. And when there isn't one, oftentimes, to Jenny's point earlier, they turn it on themselves, right? Like, should I have done something different? And it could be a very small situation, or it could be something as significant as the tragedy that we're talking about. But Jenny also pointed out that, like, you don't have a choice in those traumatic situations. Your body reacts in a way that is
instinctual.
Absolutely.
And everyone responds different, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with the way anyone responded in that church. The way any child responded in that church, the way any parent is responding to getting a phone call about something happening at their school.
It just is mind blowing, and I'm just going to name it. Is that a lot of these conversations we're having, I've only had post deployment, and it's just, I think it's so hard to fathom for kids to have to process the things that we have trouble as adults processing.
Yeah, what's interesting about adults versus kids is I will say that adults do have a harder time than kids because we have years of experience that's informing our own reaction. Kids don't have, for me, 47 years of experience in this body, in this brain, in this life to inform my reaction.
Yeah.
And so they do, actually, our adults typically have a harder time than our kids. And it's not that our kids are okay. I mean, someone asked me once, like, where do you see yourself in 20 years? And I was like, well, in 20 years, I'd like to see if I could be a really good Starbucks barista, because I would like to not have Washburn have to be a thing.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in a crappy way. Washburn does a great job, but I'd love to do preventative mental health.
Yeah.
Not reactive mental health. Right. But our services, the need for our services continues to grow. I started at Washburn, and Washburn was 50 people 22 years ago. And we have 250 staff now, right? The need continues to grow and continues to grow and continues to grow. And that's great for kids to get support. But adults oftentimes have have a harder time processing through because they have years of experiences that are informing how they're reacting.
Yeah.
I want to circle back to if kids specifically are taking on some of the guilt that comes and have verbalized it. Why didn't I do this? Well, why didn't so-and-so do this? How do you, as the adult that they're coming to, respond to that type of a question?
It's a hard one. I think it is important to reinforce that they did nothing wrong. It is important to reinforce that they did everything they were meant to do in that moment.
And it's a great opportunity for some psychoeducation.
Yeah.
Right? Like, our body doesn't even really allow us to have a choice.
Yeah.
Right? I understand you want to have choice. Like, right? And there's we want kids to find mastery. Sometimes they seek control, but we really want them to seek mastery of, instead of controlling the choice I made may have meant this. The mastery of it was my body did the very best it could in that moment, and it made choices to keep me safe.
With the information it had.
But the information it had at the time it had it.
And it's a split second reaction.
Right.
When we're processing, we have all the time in the world to think about what we could have, should have, maybe done.
Oh, years you can spend on that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But in that moment, it's
instinctual. It's not driven by choice.
No, and people who are in careers in this field, you have muscle memory. You train on this constantly. If you're just a kid attending your school's mass, like the forgiveness that you, or not forgiveness, but like the just reaction, you just, and that's where I just think it's so powerful that you have these conversations with your kids, because I'm sure there's just those thoughts pop in your brain. And like you said, kids are, very centric to that being the reason. They are the reason. So just even having, learning all this even from you as an adult, I go, wow, that's amazing how useful this would be for so many kids.
Yeah. And I think it would be great if we could be, as a country, let's have Minnesota do it better. How about that? Minnesota does a lot of things better, but particularly when it comes to mental health.
Yeah.
But if we can get our community to a space where we can have more parent education groups and this is how you talk about it with kids. Parents should never be therapists. That's an inappropriate role for a parent to have. But being able to acknowledge, this happened. You might wonder, the other day I came home from work and I was really tired and I went in my room and I closed the door. I turned my sound machine on. I'm like, I just have to lay down for 15 minutes. And I came out and one of the kids said to me, "You okay?" And I said, "I'll be okay." I'm like, I'm just tired.
Yeah.
I'm overwhelmed. I'm an introvert, right? I talked to a lot of people today. And so I just needed 15 minutes of quiet. And they were like, okay. Even in that, we're learning about each other.
Yeah.
Right. And so when this same kid actually, whenever they come home from school, goes right to their room for 30 minutes, and she said, I think that's why I go to my room after school. And I was like, probably.
Yeah. You're just around all of the people. I totally get that.
Yeah.
And for that kid to learn that, to see somebody else doing it and normalize it instead of coming home and taking on more and waiting till your boiling point. How magical is that?
And my parents are lovely, lovely human beings. They're probably listening. Hi, Mom and Dad. Really great, passive Minnesota parents who I love dearly. But they didn't know how to talk about feelings in our household because their parents didn't do it.
Yeah.
Right. And so there is this, we can also do better.
Yeah.
Right. And so I sort of joke, we didn't learn how to talk about feelings in my family. So I became a therapist to talk about all the feelings. I don't know. But it's important to have the opportunity to do that.
Well, I feel like we keep going back to this same idea of being the safe space, not just for each other, but for ourselves, and keeping that so centric to the healing process of trauma and grief, and knowing that it can last for a very long time, and being okay to sit in that and accept that and be able to move forward by doing so. Correct?
Yes, it's very true. And one thing I would add is that parents oftentimes believe that what they should be doing is doing things for their kids, right? If I do the things for my kids and I sort of don't stop, I get home from work and I make, sandwiches for dinner, and then I make lunches for the next day, and I help go through homework, but they don't sort of show the restore and rest.
Yeah.
Right? That's important for our kids too, because as adults, we have to be able to slow down and have our routines and metabolize our day. And it's important for our kids to see us doing that too, because it gives them permission to do the same thing.
And it's hard. It's hard to slow down, because when you slow down,
your
mind is able to go different places. Your body is able to feel different things. So we try to keep ourselves busy. But our kids are seeing that also. And it's okay for them to see you fumble through it.
Absolutely. We are going to continue this conversation after a short break. We want to talk about building resilience, building hope, and how that is one of the key ways to move through trauma and grief.
Here at myTalk, to bring hope and resilience in the community, I couldn't think of a better time to talk about it, Jenny, than after something that has rocked our whole community. Tell me about how resilience and hope plays such a big part in the grief process.
Well, it is fundamental to how we make it through. It's so fundamental, in fact, that Washburn has 4 core values as an organization, right? Understanding children's mental health. And one is resilience and hope. That's one of the pillars to building a community that supports children the best way they possibly can. And so there's this piece where we're talking about survivor's guilt, and, how do we heal? And joy and play is and connection. Joy and play is actually all about connection, right? Connection is a way to get through. And so sometimes people will say, but I laughed today, and yet I know this thing happened down the street at my kid's school or in my neighborhood or people I know. Should I feel bad about being happy or finding joy, or that today I enjoyed myself? You don't need to feel guilty about that. That is the natural healing process that we all go through. And when you find those sparks of joy and excitement, Kids are our best teachers. Right? You smile at a kid, and we were talking about mirror neurons earlier. You smile at them and they smile at you back almost all the time.
Yeah.
Right? And so they're our best teachers. That's how we can move through. It's part of our recovery plan, is finding the joy and the hope. And that's what builds resiliency. And Laura said it best earlier. I think we were on break, but resilient kids build other resilient kids. Yeah. They just do.
They do. When you said, I think something that hits so hard is that statement of don't feel bad for finding joy, because that is a thing.
It's a thing.
And when someone says that out loud to you in the way that you said that right now, Jenny, it helps you lift a little bit of that burden. Because I know we all feel like that. You go, I shouldn't be laughing. This horrible thing just happened.
Yeah.
But what you're saying, and what you were saying earlier, Laura, too, is that is exactly what your body needs right now.
Well, it's part of your healing, right? Like joy and finding happiness and finding meaning, even if it's for a very short period of time, is healing. And kids do it in such incredible ways that also, smart. You can't watch kids play and not feel a certain way, right?
Yeah.
Like, so if you need a pickup, if you need a little joy, you just look around. It's there. And talking about building resiliency and building hope, we have to find those small moments that maybe don't seem dramatic, but can have such a lasting impact on I'm putting one foot in front of the other.
It also helps you be sustainable in what there is to come ahead. Right? So if we don't find joy or ways to release or cry or heal and recover, then it's going to be hard for us to remember that we have to keep doing things so that this doesn't keep happening. Right? In whatever ways we do things, right? Some folks have said, what are some ways in which I can, prepare or help? I was like, well, you could get mental health first aid training. Washburn offers mental health first aid training so that you might know how to help somebody.
Say that one more time. Mental health first aid training.
Yeah. So it does not for therapists. It's for anyone, right? Who, if you're seeing someone who might have symptoms of anxiety or depression or trauma or whatever, how could you respond in a way that's positive to them? You could get CPR trained. You could make sure you thank your first responders. There's a lot of ways in which we have more work to do to recover, yes, but also to make sure and ensure that this doesn't keep happening.
And basing that around that community piece, we talked about this too, is right now, when something like this happens, like when it happened here in Minneapolis, the need to kind of like shut down and kind of get your world smaller, but how much you can find so much strength and resiliency through the community.
Community is like connection. When we look at the two different, our brains do two things. They protect us or they seek connection. The only way out of protection is through connection. And so if you need to be quiet in your house with just you and your kids or your partner or your dogs, your cats, what are your cats' names again?
Kevin. I've got Kevin, Robot Murphy, all the things.
Yes. So if you just need to be home with Kevin that night, then that's okay. If you find yourself feeling like you and Kevin just need to be alone forever and ever, that's different.
Yeah.
Right? So it's okay to have boundaries. So community and connection doesn't exist without boundaries. So if you're feeling tired, it's okay to tap out and say, I'm not going to do this thing, but I will go to this event. And that's okay too.
As a therapist, how important is the idea of rituals, vigils, collective healing? Is that something, Laura, that you'd say that is really important? It isn't just something that's there. It's something that we should all be utilizing.
I think absolutely. And how it's utilized is going to depend on what is the need of the person. So remembering, having, whether they're pictures or mementos or things that we can create positive, lasting memories for, are really beneficial for all of us. And again, if it's something that you want to keep more private, and there are things that you can do. We can write letters, we can do a drawing, we can do things that are more personal and don't need to be as visual as some of the more like memorial type things are. It's important that it's something that's meaningful to the person.
And your culture. your spiritual belief, your family system, right? All of those like rituals and routines. We can say, we can't tell you do these 5 rituals and you'll feel better, right? It's the rituals that mean something to you, your family, your culture, your spiritual background, whatever that might be. It has to be tailored to every individual person.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this with knowing your kids. Mm-hmm. It's also knowing yourself. I think that's very powerful in the way that Kendall may remember things or build resiliency is going to be different than the way I do. And being okay and understanding about my own way and Kendall's and not adding any judgment or unnecessary kind of stuff around that.
Absolutely.
If someone is finding that they're sitting in a lot of grief, they feel that anxiety, they're having a really hard time building this resilience and hope. Is there something that they can do to sort of start the process of being able to build back into the person that they want to be?
Mm-hmm. The first and most important thing you can do is tell somebody. Tell your friend, tell your pastor, tell your sister, tell your brother, tell your mom, tell your neighbor. It doesn't matter. The acknowledgement, being able to say out loud, I'm having a hard time. Most people, when they can say, this is what's happening for me, they feel better almost instantaneously. Right? Because you're sharing with somebody. It's like crying in some ways, right? You're getting it out of yourself. And so the thing that's universal for all people is to tell somebody, right? And you can even be bossy and say, I'm telling you, but I don't want to talk about it, right? I want you to check in on me in 2 days, or I need to have a coffee date with you because that's going to make me feel better, right? You can ask for. It's so weird. Minnesota's so strange, right? We're just like, well, we'll let people come to us and we'll do the things. Yeah. But we can set some boundaries and we can ask for what we need. And actually our kids love when we, they want to know how to do that themselves. So if they watch us do it, it helps them too. But that's really important. I would say that's the one thing you can do almost instantly. And it's really hard when you don't, a lot of people don't want to say, I'm having a hard time. They don't want to be a burden to another person because they see that maybe other people are having a harder time than they are, but you don't know.
And, I think that's a good thought exercise too, Jenny. This is something I deal with is you, of course, we don't want to bug anybody. But if you at all have that in reverse, it just changes everything. Do I would ever care if Kendall came to me for something? No, I'd be honored. And as soon as you reverse it, you know that the inverse is true too. And I just, I think we all benefit from acknowledging that, we are all burdens, but what else is what we're going to do? That's what we are in the best way. You've changed that word to we are all communicating and building community. It's very powerful. So I'm so glad you brought that up.
And I know with kids, one thing in our house that we were always told was what Mr. Rogers used to say. And that was when something scary or awful happens, look for the helpers. And in this case, there were so many helpers. We heard about it for weeks afterwards. Is that something that's helpful when you see a kiddo that's still kind of processing this? Is that a helpful piece of information? I mean, it helped me, so maybe that's a redundant question, but does that help kids? Hey, let's look for, the hopeful side of this.
Yeah, I think it's establishing that safe connection immediately, right? Knowing that there are people that are here, that are helpers.
Yeah.
And even just that in itself can be pretty grounding. And we do that as adults too, right? We're in a space, we look around, we check out our environment, and that can be calming because you have the information. And so we do that sort of naturally. Kids look to other people, though, for comfort and safety. And so the biggest thing we can do as adults around them is provide that. And that doesn't mean you need to provide it with verbiage necessarily. Just your presence of being there has a calming effect that goes further than I think we know a lot of times. We're verbalizers, especially clinicians. Some of the biggest progress I've seen is when we are just listening or there's silence, and that's okay too. But your presence in itself provides a calming environment for people to feel safe.
We have heard so many incredible things today when it comes to helping ourselves, helping our community, helping us talk to our kids that we love about tragedy and trauma and grief. We have a few minutes left with Jenny and Laura, the experts here from Washburn Children's, and we're going to try to wrap it up as best as we can in the coming minutes. Know, though, that if you missed any of this today, we will be airing this discussion in its entirety wherever you get your myTalk podcasts, on the myTalk YouTube channel, and we'll be replaying it on stream today and on air between 6 and 8 p.m. tonight. Wrapping things up on this very important myTalk Roundtable, Coping with Trauma, the Annunciation Church tragedy.
We have been so lucky to hang out with Jenny and Laura from Washburn Children's Services. And for the last 2 hours, we really want to talk about some of the things we hit this last 2 hours around, especially talking to our kids. Some of the things I think were really powerful around should we talk to our kids? And like, if so, what does that look like? I'm going to start with you, Laura. What does that look like to talk to our kids right now?
It should look and feel authentic. It should look and feel the way that you show up for your kids. That doesn't mean that the tone of it or the theme of it is maybe, more sad, and that's okay too. But I think talking to them in phrases that are appropriate for their age, things that they would understand, and also just gauging how much they know about a situation.
Mm-hmm. And you'd brought up, Laura, the 3 things that you can do: repair the rupture, play with your children, and showcase yourself asking for support, right?
Absolutely. 3 fundamental things. You will win the parenting award of a lifetime if you can focus on those 3 things. In fact, there really isn't more you need to focus on. That gets you connection. It gets you like a really authentic relationship with your child, which is fundamental to their wellness.
Mm-hmm. We talked about also the idea of knowing your kid and coming to, this was a big common theme, is knowing your kid and knowing the way, in different ways you would approach them with this conversation, and how there is no really wrong reaction for your kid as well, and how that plays a piece. And Jenny, you said something that was kind of powerful around the idea of we're not expected to be therapists as parents, but we are the ones that know our kids the best.
That's right. Yeah, and I think you have to lean into that. If it's awkward, it's okay that it's awkward.
Yeah.
If it's uncomfortable, it's okay it's uncomfortable. Right? But if we can show them that we're able to have these conversations, that we say something even when we don't know what to say, or that we say, I don't really know what to say, but I know that I want to sit next to you and think about this with you.
Mm-hmm. Can we name that too, Jenny? Like, if we feel it's awkward, can we verbalize?
Absolutely.
Hey, this is awkward. I know it's awkward. Yep. I know you don't want to, this is not something that's easy to talk about.
Absolutely. I would name how you feel, right? This is awkward. I want it to go well, and I wish I knew all the right things to say. And I don't think there's right things to say when we're talking about a mass shooting at a school.
Mm-hmm. You had mentioned, Laura, that no matter if they're in preschool or if you're talking to a teenager, that there's a couple of really imperative things. Find out what they already know. Mm-hmm. And then also correcting when they're older, correcting some of that misinformation.
Right. We really want to make sure that the facts are accurate, and misinformation leads to greater levels of fear and misunderstanding of what actually happened. So don't be afraid to gently but directly correct the misinformation if they're stating facts that aren't accurate.
Mm-hmm. And then, Laura, another thing we talked about as well was around the idea of kind of when to start reaching out, what the timeline is when you feel like, hey, there's some stuff going on here that feels like I should address it.
Yeah.
Can we speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, just reminder to parents that you know your kids the best, so trust your gut. If you have concerns, there are so many people that are willing to check in and to help. But I think when we talk about like duration, I think that can depend. What I look at more is like, what is the impact on your child's life? What are you seeing as a parent that you are concerned about because it's impacting their ability to show up at school, their ability that they've, loved sports and all of a sudden are not maybe wanting to go to sports. Those in itself are not, red flags. It doesn't necessarily mean that something bigger is going on, but it could. And so I think that it is just observing and knowing your kid and trusting yourself when you feel like something maybe isn't quite right.
Trusting yourself is sometimes so challenging.
Yes, it is.
But like, you and you know your babies too. We talked extensively about how trauma isn't just something that happens in your head. It is something that is also held in the body. One thing that you compared things to, Jenny, was this puzzle analogy. Can you go in detail about that?
Yeah, that when we experience something distressing, our body goes through its natural defense, which is that it breaks up the images and the experience into these different puzzle pieces where it's stored throughout the brain and the body so that we can survive the moment, right? And as we go through we close the stress cycle loop, we want to make sure we can pull together the integrated picture, but that's really normal, which is why it's important to talk about things, to help our kids make meaning of things. Otherwise, it stays. The puzzle pieces kind of stay broken up, and then they get confusing. Kids will say sometimes like, I have absolutely no idea why this makes me nervous, or I have absolutely no idea why what my mom meant when she said this. I have absolutely, like, my brothers will have this growing up will experience something. Their experience of the same event as me is completely different, because it's from their perspective and their experience and what they remembered and what got sort of locked in for them, right? And so it's important for us to work to putting those pieces back together, and that means body-mind connection.
Moving forward, and what is helpful for families, a big part of that was structure and routine. Laura, why do kids thrive so much in structure and routine?
You know what to expect.
Yeah.
You know how it feels. You know what, it's almost muscle memory, right? Like, we get into our routines and we don't necessarily have to think about it. And there's a level of, I think, takes the pressure off, right? Like, you can do some of these things that don't require you to put too much thought into it, but it's predictable. And so find something, whether it's one small thing, a couple things that are routine based. Our body also re-experiences what it feels like on other days when we go through that routine, and can be really calming.
One thing that I really blew my mind, and I think is important to bring up again, is that young kids specifically, if we don't address something, they will take it on themselves. They will put it as their own fault. They will take that blame, and that will live on in you for a long time, even if you don't know it. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, kids are naturally egocentric, and that doesn't mean that they're bad. It's that they're learning how they fit in the world. And so when things come to them, they're wondering what it means about them or for them, right? And so if we don't help them make meaning, oftentimes kids will say things like, I should have done something. I'm not a good enough kid, which is why my parents got a divorce. If I could do this, this wouldn't have happened. Because they're trying to understand something that is so complex. And if you're 3 and you're 7 and you're 12 and you're 17, it's still complex. It's complex for grownups.
Yeah.
Right? But you're trying to understand that, and you don't have a fully functioning brain. You don't have 25 years of experience to help inform you. Right? But if we can lean into our adults, if they can teach us about like rupture and repair and joy and connection, then we have an opportunity to work through that differently.
We are so thankful to have partnered up with Washburn's Children's Services. And I know myTalkers are always looking for ways to give back. And we would love to direct you to mytalk1071.com, where you can donate, because Washburn Children's Services, I mean, you've explained it so many times, is you guys are doing so many different things for so many different schools, for so many different children right here in the community. And we are so thankful for that. Jenny and Laura, we are so thankful for you guys just giving us 2 hours to have really hard conversations with things that we, me and Kendall, our moms, we don't know a lot of these answers. We want to be able to talk with our kids in a way that, shapes them in a way that they're healthy. And so thank you guys so much for that. We have a video that it will be on the myTalk YouTube channel. If this is something that somebody in your life would benefit from, we'll also have this in a podcast, and we will be playing it between 6 and 8 tonight. Thank you guys so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for coming in. If you're someone listening to that is interested in learning more about the Washburn Center for Children, just head to washburn.org. That's WASHBURN.org. Once again, thank you to Jenny Britton and Laura Gilbert. This has been an incredible, I think, experience for all of us involved.
Yeah.
And we'll get through this as a community. So thank you.